Um, I wanted to go into a bit more detail. Deputy Burton mentioned about the history of the introduction of child benefit, and I wanted to give a bit more detail because it was a progressive move when the Minister at the time, Lamass, introduced the bill to bring in universal children's allowance for children aged 3, or for the third child above in families. It was a progressive move when that was done. And I would add that the Labour Party supported that move, and it was a time when the Dáil did something worthwhile and something that, many years later we still have in place. We've built upon it, and, for all the cynicism about politics, that was a time where something worthwhile was done in this House. And, just back to the reasons that it was introduced, the reasons Children's Allowance was introduced back in 1943 was that the idea was to provide support for families, for large families. So the payment was initially brought in for families where they had 3 or more children. And I mean, I've had a look at the debate at the time and the speech that was made by Minister Lamass at the time. And what he said was, the argument he made for bringing in the payment was that wages that people earned did not relate to family size. There was nothing in the wages that, whether you had children or not, you got the same wage. There was nothing in the tax system that recognised the extra costs of having children. And the decision was taken at the time, and Lamass argued for an universal payment and that it wouldn't be means tested. And the reason he said that it shouldn't be means tested was that the government wanted to ensure that there's not the slightest suggestion of charity associated with the allowance. He went on to say that a means test would involve an inquisition into the affairs of families, which is often resented and which, as a general rule, is undesirable. He was very frank in a speech to Dáil deputies that the consequences of bringing in children's allowance would be the need for taxpayers, whether they had children or not, to pay more tax. And when he was giving his speech, he spoke at the time about models in other countries, because similar moves had happened in other countries. And one of the reports he mentioned was the Beveridge report. So basically, the model at the time was progressive moves in other countries to bring in basically what became the welfare state. The NHS in Britain, we had similar kind of activities by Franklin D. Roosevelt in the United States in his approach to their depression and activity that he carried out when he was president in America. There were very hard times. There was a Second World War. We had food rationings, including in this country. And at that time, there was very progressive thought about, how society should work together to do the things that needs to be done about the issues that were important and about things that you valued. And one of the things that our Dáil did at the time was it brought in a payment which was about valuing children. And the reasons for having children's or child benefit today are the same reasons for having children's allowance then and for not means testing it at the time. And that is that we value children. We believe children have unique rights. We don't allow children to work. We believe that they should have a protective upbringing. They should have an opportunity to go to education and so on. And children have no income. And this was a payment for children, and it's a payment for children now. Parents of children, they get the same wages just as they did then, whether they have children or not. And this is the state's way of providing an income for children. And if we basically take away if we get rid of the universality of child benefit, we will be taking away money from children who have no income. Children that we're supposed to protect in our society. And just in relation to the universality, the principle of universality in relation to child benefit, I just would mention about some of the countries that have universal child payments similar to our own. There was a report in 2006 which was paying for the cost of children in 8 northern European countries, and it noted that the following 7 countries had universal non-means tested child benefit payments to parents: Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands, Finland, Norway, Germany and the United Kingdom. And what I would say about that is that it's notable that countries that have, it's notable that the Scandinavian countries are in that list, and those Scandinavian countries have actually a lot of universality. They have much more universality in their social provision that we have in Ireland. We have some of it, but we have a very limited amount of it. Most of our social welfare payments are means tested. And, The countries that are doing best in terms of equality, their economies are better than ours, they've more infrastructure, they've more provision of good public services, they have more universality and more equality than we do. And rather than rolling back on progress that we made in introducing universality in relation to child benefit, we should be trying to bring in more universality, for example, in relation to our health system. And you know, we need to preserve what universality that we have. And just because there are hard times is not a reason to roll back progress in relation to universality. The countries that introduced universality did it at a time, as I said, like just in Britain, just after the Second World War, when there was very financial straitened times, when they'd just come out of war, when loads of housing had been destroyed in Britain, and they brought in a national health service based on the principle of universality. And that's the direction we should be heading in, rather than using our economic recession as an excuse to roll back on progress that we made back in 1943. And just in relation to the philosophy that underpins universality, it's a generous philosophy. It's a generous political impulse. It was a generous political impulse that Sean Lemass demonstrated when he decided to bring in universal children's allowance. It's about social solidarity and working together and what we value as a society. And for example, one of the areas we have universality is in relation to education. We don't have it in health, and in health we have a dysfunctional system, but our education is a good system and it provides for all our children. It's not perfect, but it has helped us make great progress in the society. And you know, similarly, we had universality in relation to medical cards for over 70s. For the little savings that the government's made, that was a begrudging attitude when the government went after people aged over 70 in relation to their medical cards. And similarly, when people talk about taking away child benefit or universal child benefit from children, that's a begrudging, ungenerous motivation. It's an ungenerous political move. And just in relation to, just to mention finally, just about the value that we place on children and our rights and their rights in the society. When we had our proclamation, when our proclamation was signed in 1916, that spoke about the cherishing of the nation equally. You know, that was about, at that time, those people, they valued rights. There was a concept there that children had unique rights and we should cherish them and we should protect them. We don't have a good record on children's rights in many respects in this country, and that's all coming out now in the Ryan report and the report in the Dublin Diocese, and the fact that we've stalled in doing anything about children's rights in our constitution. Many other countries have children's rights in the constitution. It's not a big deal. We should just get on with it and provide children's rights. And we need to do more to vindicate children's rights. We need to work together to protect and value and cherish our children. And rather than begrudging children this payment, we should build on it and maintain the universality and do more to vindicate the rights of children in our society.
Thank you very much, Deputy.